What's up, y'all? We've got a UFC fighter on the show today. We've got Tim Elliott. He's been in the fight game for a long time. He won the season 24 of The Ultimate Fighter. He's got multiple Fight of the Night bonuses, Performance of the Night bonuses. Really exciting fighter, and it was a great podcast. I had a great time talking to him. Tune in.
It's looking like a card of paparazzi. Two phones in my pocket, talking. Yeah, I got it. Black card in my wallet. If I want it, then I cop shotgun, ride shotty. I don't need nobody.
You and I, we met at Next Generation MMA. It was actually in a jiu-jitsu class. And, man, I'm a big MMA and UFC fan. I always have been since I was a kid. I was thinking in my head when I saw you, I was like, dude, I know who that is. That's Tim Elliott from The Ultimate Fighter. And I had in my head, I was like, man, one of these roles I'm going to ask him to roll, because I was interested in getting to roll with someone at a high level like that. Between a roll, I went to turn around to go ask you, and you were right there in front of me, and you actually asked me to roll. And so to me, being such a big fan, just first of all, I wanted to say that was super cool for me, man. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, man. Chris got a bunch of good guys in there. The MMA team is small, and the first time I started doing jiu-jitsu in there, I didn't realize how many guys he has come to jiu-jitsu every night. It's crazy. Yeah,
he's got a really cool gym. I really like Chris as a coach too, and as a person. He's been a cool person to meet and know as well. So you were the Ultimate Fighter Season 24 winner, and this was, for people who don't know, flyweight champions from around the world, all different champions from other organizations competing in this tournament, and that was the first time the Ultimate Fighter had been set up that way. And some of the names for people that know the UFC: Brandon Moreno, Kai Kara France, Alexandra Pantoja, Matt Schnell, Tim Elliott. Huge murderer's row of names in the flyweight division were on that show and panned out in the UFC. And you were the number one pick and the winner of the whole show. So going into that, you had previously been in the UFC before that. Coming into it, because you had previously been in the UFC, were you thinking you were going to be a really high pick, or did you think that would hurt you and you would be on the lower end?
I wasn't really sure when they started doing. So the UFC had just fired me. I had, I think, 3 fights outside of the UFC with Titan. I won a belt under Titan. My first fight with Titan was Elliott Santos. So I was fighting good guys outside of the UFC. Then the Ultimate Fighter thing started happening. So if you just wait, you'll just get back in the UFC and you won't be on the Ultimate Fighter contract or any of that. And you won't have to be away for 7 weeks or whatever. But I did it anyway. I thought it was, probably my only shot at being able to fight for a world title. And I knew at that point they were going to have a lot of young guys in there. So I knew that I would do okay. But I know for the fact that the UFC, the last thing to win the tournament and fight for a world title, they had a bunch of dudes in there that were 19, 21 years old that were champions in their country. I was the last guy the UFC wanted to win.
Do you think that ever affected any type of negotiations or how the UFC promoted you moving forward, or do you think it all just worked out for the best?
No, I think it worked out really well, and I think, now being in the UFC as long as I have, I think that they appreciate me, and, they always give me good opportunities, and, I was able to be exciting on the show. And I was lucky at that time. I was in there with a bunch of guys that were still young enough. Like Brandon Moreno was still so green that I watched him go from getting beat in the first fight in the house to being one of the best dudes that I've ever rolled with. So and I told my dad before the show, right when I got off the show, I was like, hey man, this kid Brandon Moreno will be the UFC champion of the world. I told James Krause the same thing, and my dad and James were both like, "There's no way." But since he got beat out early, I looked after him and trained with him pretty much the whole time.
Yeah, he's a guy that I like, and I think a lot of fans in the sport do too. When there's someone in such a crazy, aggressive, masculine sport that's just such a nice, happy, smiley individual, it's kind of a unique thing. And Brandon Moreno, he definitely brings that, and a lot of people like him for just how kind of a person he seems like he is.
He really is, and he's not faking. He's not putting on a front. That's genuinely how he is, and that's the thing I like about him is you can just tell that he loves fighting. He loves it, and I like that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can see that. You can usually sense the fakeness if it is that, and you can tell it's not with him. Do you watch the Ultimate Fighter shows, and have you watched your season, or are you a guy that's like, nah, I don't want to go back and watch myself on TV?
So I started watching a little bit of it. I've never seen it before, but I've watched some clips and things. But I started trying to rewatch it because I hadn't seen it. But they made me look really good. Like right when the show was over and I got to where I could talk to my family, like I had to call my grandma and be like, hey, I was hungry the whole time on the show. I had to make weight 4 times in 4 weeks. I was just a miserable, hungry prick the whole time. So I had to explain to my grandma, I might come off looking like a real, piece of shit after they air this show. And it was, I was pleasantly surprised to see that, the UFC made me look as good as they could. And, I was very grateful for that, because there was some moments in that where I just making weight 4 times in 4 weeks, I felt like I couldn't do it. And a lot of those guys were small, eating a pound of bacon every morning, and I would have to fight and then come home and immediately start cutting weight for the next week. It was a miserable time in my life, and I was lucky enough to have Joseph Benavidez, somebody that I'd fought, and somebody like Joe knew I wasn't the #1 seed, but Joe picked me first right away, and I think Joe knew that I was going to win the show, way before I did.
Yeah, he spoke highly of you on there, and you could tell that he was happy to get you with the first pick for sure. So staying on the track of fighting, but kind of different question. It may or may not pertain to the Ultimate Fighter show, but out of all of your career, who's impressed you the most out of everyone you've ever trained with? And it could be wrestling or it could be MMA, but who's impressed you the most?
Man, it's going to sound weird, but the guy that I thought was the best, and the whole reason why I moved to Kansas City, and the whole reason why I even made it to the UFC and was able to stay in for so long, was James Krause. Maybe not the best when it comes to UFC fighting or MMA fighting, but when you talk about breaking down fights and just technicians and his ability to grow and learn and teach, James Krause. And I even said in interviews before, I was I'm never going to be able to train hard enough to catch guys like Brandon Moreno, these young guys. I'm never going to be able to outwork these young guys. But the only way I can beat guys like Brandon Moreno is if I can get a coach or somebody like James Krause to teach me how to beat specific guys. And I said that on an interview, and then no more than 2 months later, Brandon Moreno was in Kansas City training at our gym. And I was well, there goes my shot at beating these guys. And then, so James is really up there. Again, I'm putting his ability to coach and know the game in that, just crazy, and he's a lot bigger than me, but even when he was fighting at 155 and he'd come right off the scale at fights, and I'd be and I would be 150 pounds, I would think I'll fuck this dude up right now. And then no chance. He's just so fucking good, and, he's forgot more about MMA than I'll ever know.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing to have minds like that in the sport, because a lot of people from the outside also probably think it's such a physical-only sport. They don't realize how much of the mental it is. So, changing gears here, a little bit more lighthearted question, but what's your favorite sponsor you've ever had?
Man, I had a King Palm sponsor for a while. That's these, I don't know, they're palm leaf things that you put weed into to smoke. But, some guy just randomly asked me if I wanted to be sponsored by them, and I was like, sure. And I thought I was just going to be getting product, which I didn't really want. But for 4 or 5 months, they were giving me $2,500 a month cash on top of some products. So it was the first time I ever monthly sponsor. It didn't last long, because as soon as I put them in my bio, it's my management team saw it, and then all of a sudden 10 guys from my management company were being sponsored by them, and they were like, hey, we got to cut your sponsorships. But that was cool. That was the first time I ever got a monthly thing. That's pretty
cool. That's pretty cool, man. When it comes to this is kind of a funny question to me, but I saw it on another podcast and I liked it. What UFC fight shorts do you hate the most? Which ones do you see and you're like, why do people even wear those? I hate those.
Man, the skirt type ones that get all frilly, I don't understand it. I mean, I guess it could be distracting, but yeah, man, I don't really get it. But I know it's not just the fight game; it's also the entertainment game, and you can't just go in and win fights. That's not enough anymore. That certainly helps, but they'll cut guys' mouths just for being boring. So anything to the table to make it entertaining, even if it's goofy, I think the UFC is embracing it, and that's the kind of thing I didn't really like about when Reebok took over. Is now everybody's wearing the exact same things. There's no Dennis Hallman's coming in fighting in their panties or anything. I miss that.
Yeah, that I think at least it seems like the UFC's trying to keep their their finger on the pulse a little bit more because they're letting the fighters customize some shorts and stuff now. I think they're realizing what the fans make the sport. I mean, and the fighters, but the fans and the fighters are the core of the sport. And so when you have the fans that want that, I think a lot of people, especially myself too, I like the older shorts where you can put whatever sponsors you have on there and it looks how you want it to look. So I agree with you on that.
Well, some of the guys, like, they made big money in sponsorships, so they were pissed when Reebok took over. For me, I never made any sponsorship money, so when Reebok came over and was like, oh, you're going to get this allotted amount of money every fight now, I was like, oh, hell yeah. But, like, a lot of guys were like, man, I make $20,000, $30,000 in sponsorships a fight, and I'm like, oh, shit. I was happy about the $4,000 from Reebok.
Yeah, I guess it does depend on which side of that you're on at the time. Yep. Who's been your biggest supporter throughout your career? Who do you want to give a shout out to in that way?
Man, definitely my father. I started my pro MMA career out with, because I didn't have any amateur fights, but I started with
Really?
0 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw for my first 3 fights. And, my dad, he never really told me, like, it was cool to see him, like, change just, with 1 fight. He finally was like, okay, like, maybe you can do this. And, it's a weird thing because, man, I fought for years where I didn't make any money in the UFC, and now I'm old and, like, I should retire, but I'm finally making a good paycheck when I fight. So now I just want to fight more than ever. So it's kind of a bittersweet thing. You finally get to the point to where you're making enough money, and by that time you're too old to do it.
Yeah, it can be a thankless situation at times, but man, I'm a huge fan. I always want to see the best for everyone, so I'm glad to hear that you're happy with the money that you are making these days. So I'm going to kind of move into some more of, like, who is Tim Elliott. So what about your personality do you think makes you a successful fighter?
Man, I think just my ability to know that I don't know shit. Like, I can go in, and I wasn't always that way. Like, in wrestling, somebody would show something, and if I thought I was better than them, I'd be like, that shit ain't gonna work, or that shit ain't gonna work on me. Like, now, I could go to a Jukindo seminar with weird finger bending stuff, and I could take something out of that class that I know is gonna help me. And I think that's the only thing that's been able to keep me in the game is, like, I don't have an ego when it comes to somebody teaching me something. If you're going to take the time to try to show me something, even if you don't know shit, I'm going to keep my mouth shut and listen just in case. And I think that has helped me, like, be able to take things from everybody. Like, I'm a thief, man. If I see something cool or I see something, like, I'm going to steal that shit and I want to use it for myself. And, that's gotten me in trouble in some fights too, because rather than being safe, I'm like, fuck it, I'm going to try to do this. So I think my ability just to, like, put my ego aside and take, anybody trying to put in any kind of effort or help with me, I just, shut my mouth, open my ears, and try to take it.
That's cool. I think that's a really mature way to look at it. It's kind of like the forever being a white belt mentality, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So what's your favorite part about being a dad?
Oh, man, there's so many things. It sucks now because my daughter's old enough to where she's in school, so I don't have her all day. But before she started kindergarten, we just hung out all day. She would come to the gym. The best thing about the UFC is I never had to, like, put my kid in daycare. She never had to have a babysitter. Like, I've been able to, like, I never missed any milestones. Like, I've seen her first steps, her first words. So my favorite part is tough. I think it's just the ability to be able to have the time that I do to be the dad, because I'm soft. Like, I get sad when I drop her off at school. I'm like, what am I going to do for fucking 8 hours? And I'm like, I know you're not learning for 8 hours in there. Like, I'm going to learn for 8 hours in a kid. But, like, a lot of people, they need the school for a daycare or somebody to watch. But, like, every morning I have to go through, like, a shit, now what? My best friend is gone for 8 hours. But, that's another thing I can thank the UFC for is I was able to spend countless hours with my daughter that, my dad did not get to spend with me because, he was working 40, 50, 60 hours a week so that we could survive. And I don't have to do any of that. And that's all UFC. And like, that's my favorite thing about being a dad is I get to spend so much time with a cool little person that, is, mine.
That's a beautiful thing, man. I think that's really a testament to who you are as a person. I think that speaks volumes to me when people talk about their kids like that. So your daughter being around you fighting a lot growing up, especially like you just described, does she watch your fights and does it affect her negatively when you lose, or is she too young to understand? How does she feel?
I down with it, but for her, it's weird because she goes to a private Christian school now, and she had an incident once where I guess she like bent some kid's finger back, and like they called me into the school. Like I pulled her out of jiu-jitsu after that but she didn't understand why everybody was upset, because her whole life she's seen people beat the shit out of each other and then at each other and then go out to eat and be best friends. Fighting to her has never been a thing of, if she saw two people street fighting, she wouldn't be like, you know what I mean? She would just sit there and watch, because she's seen so many fights. It's not like a negative thing. It's not an emotional thing. There's, it's just a thing that people do. And in her instance, like, it's people that do it that are best friends with each other. Like, these guys love each other. So she sees fighting as kind of like, that's just what friends do with each other, and it's not to like tell her like, hey man, we're going to get kicked out of this fancy ass Christian school, and what are we going to do then? Like, didn't really understand. She thought like that she was friends with the kid who he bent his finger. It's just, she thought that's what you do. And she's old enough now to where she's grown past that. But I think the older she gets, the less she likes the fighting, because I think she is starting to understand it. But I've been lucky. Like, I don't take a lot of damage. Like, I might get subbed or I might get beat, but I've never been knocked out. I've only either been hit hard maybe like 5 times in my whole UFC career where I was like, oh shit, that fucking hurt. I'm pretty good at avoiding damage in that sense. So she's never seen me too beat up. Like, the worst part is the losses, and like now that's just become such a part of the sport that it sucks, but it only sucks because I get half my paycheck, and my daughter gets half her money because of that. So that's the only real downside to losing, because I enjoy the fight game, and I would do it for a lot less money. I'm glad to finally be able to be making a living though.
Who is the most golden soul of anyone you've met in your career? Someone that maybe is just extremely selfless to you. Maybe they've been loyal to you. They're always there as a friend, or could be UFC staff member. Anybody like that you'd want to shout out?
Man, I'm going to say his name again. I said it earlier. And, even with the trouble that had happened with the gym and stuff. But James Krause, man, he's been my best friend. He's my coach that got me into the UFC. And now he can't coach anymore, but he's still my mentor. Like, he helps me with financial advice, like helping me with real estate advice. Like, him not being able to coach guys in the UFC anymore affected his relationship, I think, with a lot of people. But if anything, it made him and I's relationship closer, because now we don't have to deal with him being my coach and me having to learn from him. Now it's just me benefiting from him being a friend, and he's always just been the guy that has. Fuck, man, he made my career there. Without James Krause, there's no Tim Elliott, so definitely James Krause.
Shout out James Krause for that, man. Thank you for being that for this guy, and I'm sure many others if he's that for you. So we're going to play a little game real quick. It's just called This or That. I'm going to name 2 things, and you got to pick one, but you can't tell why. So first one, grappling or striking?
Striking.
Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Eminem or Lil Wayne?
Eminem.
Lifting weights or running?
Lifting weights.
Follow politics closely or ignorance is bliss?
Ignorance is bliss.
No gi or gi jiu-jitsu?
No gi.
I'm glad you said that, because I don't know if I could have aired this training under Chris Brennan if you said gi.
Yeah. I suck in the gi, man. I'm fighting my opponent and myself in that thing.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Conor McGregor or Khabib Nurmagomedov?
Conor.
Would you rather have a do-over from age 21, this is just career-wise, or keep the life you have?
Keep the life I have.
Okay. Headbutts or knees to a downed opponent if you could legalize one?
Headbutts.
Nice. Tracy Cortez or Mackenzie Dern?
Mackenzie Dern.
95 Hummer H1 or 95 Ford Bronco?
Ford Bronco.
Bronco. Nice. I'm a Ford guy myself. Go back and be 16 for a day or be 21 for a day?
16 for a day.
16. Rampage Jackson or Chuck Liddell?
Chuck Liddell. That was a tough one.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of both. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, so Rampage is from Memphis, and so I grew up being a big fan of his. Would you rather live in a neighborhood with 5 of your closest friends, just y'all in a neighborhood, or would you rather have one big plot of land to live by yourself with your daughter?
Oh man, one big plot of land.
One big plot. All right. Last one on this game. GSP or Anderson Silva?
Anderson Silva.
All right. All right. We're in the final stretch. I'm not going to keep you too much longer, man. Last few questions. Let's see. So I saw in an interview that you got some stem cell treatment. I think it was on your knee. How did that pan out for you? Do you suggest that for other people?
Man, of course, a lot of it may be placebo, but I was having a hard time even walking. And then I went and got the stem cells, and they say you're supposed to wait like 11 days before you do anything, and really a few months before you do hard training. But within 8 days, I was back training full time in Chris's gym and able to fight. I fought twice, right after that.
So it worked pretty well for you, and earlier than they even said. And you said maybe placebo, but it seemed like it did.
Yeah, I mean, whatever works. Yeah, it did. It seemed to help. But I also did the IV stem cells, so I did it through my whole body and direct injection. So
okay.
And I didn't they have like a nice place. It's like a resort you can go into, and like you sleep in a hyperbaric chamber, but that's like really expensive. I took $5,000 in cash across the border, and I didn't stay in the nice facility. I would get my treatments and then run across the street to a like cheap, nasty hotel for $20 a night, and they're like, "You have an infection, but it's way cheaper." So I did it that way.
Okay, I got you. So if you were building a perfect fighter, if you had to start him in one martial art, which martial art would you start him in?
Man, definitely wrestling, I think.
Okay.
There's two types of fighters in the world: those that wrestled and those that wish they wrestled.
I like that. I agree with that. I only wrestled 1 year when I was younger, but I know just from that 1 year how hard it was, and I know how much I've seen it benefit fighters in UFC and MMA in general. So I see why you would say that for sure. So with building a perfect fighter, do you think starting in one sport like that and being dominant in that one sport is best these days, or do you think a fighter should start learning everything at once?
I think if your goal is to be a fighter, probably everything all at once. But, I mean, when you're starting out at a young age, I think getting in something, it doesn't have to be wrestling, but any kind of base, where you learn, like, discipline and things like that. It's more about having some structure and, like, something to do rather than, what it is. It's just doing something that is going to push you toward, the goal that you want.
Let's see. Who is your favorite fighter of all time?
Man, probably Anderson Silva.
Silva, okay. Dude, watching him in his prime was like nothing else, bro.
And he went over and box. He can really box. He's the real deal.
Yeah,
he make people look silly. I like that.
Yeah, he was one of the most fun fighters I've ever watched for sure, too. I definitely agree with that. Okay, last two questions, man, and I'll let you get up out of here. So, what's something that it would take fighters years to learn that you could explain to them in a few sentences?
Loyalty is a big one. I've seen so many fighters stick around gyms. Good fighters have stuck around gyms to be loyal to coaches that weren't helping them get the best out of it. And the loyalty is. And Robert Follis told me this before he died when I was talking about loyalty and what fighters do for their coaches. And that's when he said, "Well, that's bullshit." He said, "Loyalty is a two-way street." Said, if you're being loyal to me as a fighter and I'm not helping you achieve your goals, he's like, that's not loyalty, that's stupidity. He's like, you can't just be loyal to a coach in a gym because you've been there for an amount of time. It takes the coach working with you and trying to better you as well, and nothing to do with him. So I think that was a big thing that I've seen so many fighters never make it because they were loyal to this garage gym and these guys, these training partners that just weren't good enough training partners. Go and get to a gym where you got good people around you, and then that'll. But I've seen it happen a million times. Guys never leave their small gyms, and they never get any better, and they never really make it.
That makes a lot of sense. Last one. It's kind of a fun one. Do you think fighters should be completely clean, have only TRT when needed to maybe a certain TRT level, or be allowed to take anything?
I mean, I'm a flyweight, so if I took steroids, I would be a 155-pounder. so I think it matters less for me. But I think the people that are going to cheat, whether it's legal or not. So I think cut USADA, cut all the drug testing, and pay the fighters more. That's what I think. Let them cheat, because again, cheaters are going to cheat. Like, cocaine is illegal, but lots of people do it. You know
right.
what I mean?
Absolutely.
It doesn't stop. If I want to do cocaine, I'm going to do cocaine, whether it's legal or not. If I'm going to, I think I see these guys, though, they fly these USADA guys all around, and like, I've missed tests where I've scheduled that I told them, like, hey, I'm going to be gone at this time, and then USADA shows up, and I'm like, hey, man, look in the report. I said I was going to be leaving, and they're like, okay, it's no worries. But they just wasted thousands of dollars. They're paying a salary to this guy to go and do nothing. Well, like, I would rather everybody be cheating and me make another $50,000 a fight.
Yeah, the fighters definitely. I think we all agree could be getting more as far as percentage wise and compared to other sports and stuff. But I do see it improving. Hopefully, it continues to improve.
Conor McGregor getting in the sport made everybody more money. As soon as Conor McGregor got into the UFC, I automatically started making more money.
Damn, it was that big of an effect. You saw that big of an effect like that?
Immediately. Like, it happened like almost overnight. As soon as he got popular, everybody started making more. Well, because you can't have somebody making $20 million and then somebody making $2,000. Like,
yeah.
Got to close the gap a little bit, and that's happened. And immediately, as soon as he got in, like, everybody started making more money. Or at least me personally, I started making more money immediately.
Yeah, that transformed a lot. With that, okay, that makes me want to ask one more question, and then I promise I'll let you go after that. So, with Conor and how his trajectories went lately, what do you think happens next for him? How do you think that pans out?
I don't know. It seems like he really wants to fight. He's pushing it. I don't know. I know he doesn't need to fight. I like that he still wants to fight, even though he doesn't have to.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing he's going to end up at bare knuckle.
Oh, that would be nice. And I've heard you say, I think in an interview, that you might want to go bare knuckle next too. So that would be really cool.
Of course, go see fighters, man. I'm going to go try to make as much money as I can there as well. You know what I mean? Like, if I can't compete with the best guys, it'll be because I'm just too old. It's not because I'm taking a bunch of damage. So I could go take some shots at bare knuckle and still be fine for a couple of years. I feel like I got the knees for it.
Yeah, I think you would do really well there, man. Especially you talking about your defense earlier and how you don't get hit much, and then a bare knuckle. I mean, if you're a guy that doesn't have good defense, it's probably not the sport for you, But that sounds great, bro. I'd really like to see you there too. Obviously, in the UFC, as long as you want to be there, and then go to bare knuckle. But man, it was a pleasure having you on here. I'm honored to be able to talk to you, and just want to give you a chance. So, where can people go follow you?
At awkward_MMA on Instagram.
All right, cool, man. Well, have a safe drive. It was good talking to you, man. Hopefully I'll see you again.
I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, man.